first important act concerning immigrants during the first decade of the country's history came during a time of fear and reaction. And this is so important to appreciate about immigration policy and reform. It comes during a time of fear and reaction. So when we take a look at the first act concerning immigrants in this country, when this country was created, it introduced to us the concept of alien. And this is so important. Alien. Alien. And most often, alien has always been associated with sedition. So let's appreciate alien and sedition. These are the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. Now, the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798 were passed during a time of bitter partisan conflict between the Federalist Party of John Adams and the Democratic Republican Party of Thomas Jefferson. The origins of anti-immigrant fervor were both domestic and international. Now, domestically, immigrants were seen as a potential support for oppositional politics. Internationally, the cause was the French Revolution and the political turbulence that it spurred throughout Europe. Political refugees arrived en masse in the United States in the late 1790s. And many in the U.S. feared that the ideas of these political refugees would destabilize the new U.S. democracy. And this concern about immigrants translated into a political tone that questioned one's loyalty to the United States. Now, the administration of John Adams viewed immigrants as lending support to Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republican following. So let's hear from historian Eric Foner as he explains the atmosphere under which the Alien and Sedition Acts were passed.
Well, in 1798, the United States, under the presidency of John Adams, was involved in what was called the quasi-war with France. France and England were at war. The United States wasn't fully at war, but it was engaged in certain naval battles with France, and there was fear of a broader war. Congress, under the control of the Federalist Party, passed these Alien and Sedition Acts. The Alien Act basically gave the president the right to deport any immigrant he wanted, largely because the Federalist Party thought a lot of these immigrants coming in the 1790s were radical Jeffersonians who were voting for the Jeffersonian Republican Party. The Sedition Act basically made it a federal crime to criticize the government. As in other wars, the government doesn't like criticism, and it defines criticism of its policies as unpatriotic, as seditious, etc. So the Sedition Act made it possible for the federal government to prosecute and jail particularly newspaper editors who criticized the Adams administration. It was mostly a political measure. I mean, these newspapers weren't doing anything which had any effect on the quasi-war with France, but an election was coming up 2 years later, the election of 1800. The Jeffersonian Party was rising, and the Adams administration was trying to crush out political opposition. Somewhere between 10 and 15 newspaper editors actually were put on trial under the Sedition Act, and some of them were thrown in jail. The most famous was Matthew Lyon, a member of Congress from Vermont, who also edited a newspaper very strongly anti-Adams, and he was actually convicted under the Sedition Act and jailed for a while. But the reaction against this was very strong and actually contributed to the election of Jefferson in 1800, when the slogan of the Jeffersonians was Jefferson and Liberty. And one of the things they meant by liberty was rescinding the Alien and Sedition Acts, which they did soon after getting into office.
Okay, so students, you need to pay attention here to what the historian Eric Foner is sharing with regards to Alien and Sedition. It was related to political turmoil. It was also related to the fact that there was this fear. Political refugees were arriving in the United States en masse. Many in the U.S. feared their ideas would destabilize the U.S. democracy. And this concern about immigrants translated into a political tone, because at that time, the Federalists were being challenged. The Federalists, when the United States was first created, everybody thought it was just going to be one party, and that was the Federalist Party. But the Federalist Party was breaking apart under John Adams' administration. Actually, Thomas Jefferson led a separate movement and created the Democratic Republican Party to challenge the Federalists. So John Adams is reacting to Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Jefferson is using the immigrants because they're coming in and they're supporting the Democratic Republicans. So John Adams passes these laws to stop Thomas Jefferson and the Democratic Republican Party. So again, what's most importantly is that it was bitter partisan conflict between the Federalist Party of John Adams and the Democratic Republican Party of Thomas Jefferson, but it was also during a time of fear and reaction. And that fear and reaction led to the notion of using the term alien. And this is so significant because we need to understand why alien is still part of our vocabulary that we use to describe immigrants. It's always associated with sedition. And I want to introduce this to you because the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, though they're not on the books anymore, in World War I, during World War I, these acts are going to come back, and they're going to be known as the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1917 and the Espionage Act of 1918. Anyway, when we get to it, we'll appreciate the specific years. Now, let's take a look at a film clip from a movie portraying John Adams. And let's encounter the political division amongst the slaveholding classes, under Thomas Jefferson, the slavery classes, and capitalism, John Adams, and the indentured servant. Because that's basically what we see. We see two wealthy white males, privileged white males, and they are each representing different kinds of labor forces. John Adams represented the indentured, is the one that the white males, rich white males benefit from having indentured servants, whereas Thomas Jefferson is benefiting from having African slaves. Let's take a look at these two presidents hammer it out over the Alien Sedition Acts.